Hey guys, my name is Jason Schuster. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I own Intricate Art Spine and Body Solutions. It's a continuing education company. We teach other doctors how to do a couple things. And today we're going to talk about resveratrol, how it reduces pro-inflammatory proteins throughout the body, how it reduces chronic inflammation, and at the end of this video, you guys will get a free code to our Intro to Nutrition course. It's a great board certified and accredited nutrition class. It'll really help everybody with their nutrition goals for the new year in 2025. So resveratrol regulates brain inflammation and diabetic neuropathy. So diabetic neuropathy and diabetes in general is a huge problem in the United States. We have about 80% of the US population that is either overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. That means all of those people are probably either going to be pre-diabetic or diabetic, right? Big problem, really affects our health negatively. Having too much sugar in the body, you guys, is a huge problem, and it's a tiny difference. A lot of people don't realize this, but think about a teaspoon of sugar, right? So a person without diabetes, more or less, has about 1 teaspoon of free-floating glucose in their bloodstream. A person with full-blown type 2 diabetes has two teaspoons. Right, so the difference between normal and full-blown type 2 diabetic is 1 teaspoon of sugar in the blood. 1 teaspoon. And the FDA recommends that it's okay to eat up to 10 grams of added sugar a day. It's absolutely insane, you guys. That is poisoning ourselves, right? So we should really try to completely eliminate added sugar from our diet. That is the most healthy thing to do. That's pretty hard though. I like ice cream and stuff like that too. So I just try to limit it as much as humanly possible. And I just feel better when I eat that way, right? It also helps improve brain function. So just like having deficiency in omega-3s, right? The brain is about 20 to 30% omega-3s. Our whole nervous system tissue put together, about 33% of it is omega-3s, right? So if we don't have enough omega-3s, our nervous system can't function well. And one of the things that also helps the nervous system function well is resveratrol, right? So it helps with inflammation, that helps with the nervous system, it helps protect microglia, it helps protect neurons from inflammatory damage, so things like concussions or any type of chronic issue in the body is going to cause a corresponding chronic issue in the part of the brain that's responsible for that part of the body, you guys. This is not something that a lot of people think about it this way. So one of the ways that I think about it is if you gave a neurosurgeon a picture of a stroke patient's brain and they had never seen that patient, they could probably give you a pretty good idea of what the patient was going to present with based on what part of the brain was damaged. But that is true in the opposite direction too, you guys. If you have a problem in your hand, the part of your homunculus in your brain that's responsible for moving your hand is also going to have a problem, especially the longer the problem goes on, right? And it's not just the part in the motor cortex of the homunculus, it's lots of other parts of the brain. We just have no idea how different parts of the brain are interacting with each other, more or less. Like, we think we have pretty good ideas of how individual parts of the brain are responsible for doing certain things, but we really don't understand at all how those parts interact with each other, and we're really just scratching the surface on all this stuff, but it's really exciting, right? So there's 2 mechanisms primarily which resveratrol has been seen to regulate antioxidants and inflammatory mediators. So one of them is malinaldehyde, right? And one of them is glutathione. So malinaldehyde is a product of polyunsaturated fat peroxidation. It increases concentrations of free radicals, which increases oxidation, right? So that inhibits or impairs reduction reactions. Elevated malinaldehyde is a commonly known marker of oxidative stress, right? So it's used to measure antioxidant capacity and status in cancer patients also, you guys. So that's a helpful thing to know. So malinaldehyde is a good indicator of oxidative stress. Resveratrol it regulates that pathway, which helps regulate oxidative stress. And glutathione is another one, right? So you hear glutathione talked about a lot in nutrition and supplementation literature. It is in a lot of the supplements that people take, and it helps in a lot of different ways. So glutathione is a tripeptide, right? So it's made up of 3 different peptides. It has cysteine, glutamic acid, and glycine, right? So amino acids. Glutathione can be oxidized or reduced just like most things, right? And it has a lot of different capabilities as far as antioxidant goes, antioxidation, DNA regulation, DNA repair, protein folding. It's really, really important for having proper cellular homeostasis, right? Typically in states without stress or cellular states in the absence of stress, glutathione is typically reduced. And when we go into stress states, glutathione becomes oxidized, right? Or it changes its form and it starts to do different things. So that's one of the amazing things about our body, is based off of the cellular environment. If we go into a state of mental or physical stress, substances like glutathione will actually change their structure to do different things based off of what they need to do. And that's one of the mysteries of genetics and epigenetics right now, you guys, is the ability of those proteins to change based off of outside indicators or extrinsic factors does not go with the typical idea of genetics, which is still taught in medical school in 2024, where we're taught that basically what your DNA says is how you're gonna turn out, which is more or less totally wrong. That's only the case in about 5% of the population or less, right? Very, very rare. One example of that would be Down syndrome or trisomy 21. Huntington's disease would be another one. There's a couple of them like that, but very, very rare. So glutathione really, really helps with oxidation and inflammation, and it helps with a whole bunch of other stuff. So the NRF2 pathway, resveratrol, is a very potent stimulator of the NRF2 pathway, you guys. And another potent stimulator of the NRF2 pathway is dry needling, joint manipulation, exercise, right? A lot of these supplements also stimulate the NRF2 pathway. Creatine is talked about doing that. Omega-3s are talked about doing that. It's really, really important to approach these things from different locations, and if they're all working in the same generalized mechanism, you just get more force or more power. It's like having a bigger team or a bigger army to attack this problem, right? So the NRF2 pathway, as far as I understand, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, PhD, she does some really, really good podcasts about this, and her podcast is included in this talk here, you guys. So go back and find that. It's called the Found My Fitness podcast, by the way. So NRF2 stands for nuclear erythroid related factor 2, right? It is the strongest anti-inflammatory pathway that we have found inside the mitochondria thus far, right? So it's a mitochondrial anti-inflammatory pathway. So not only does resveratrol decrease the amount of pro-inflammatory cytokines, right? So resveratrol changes the way that our genes are expressed. That's how it's working. So resveratrol limits the amount of gene expression for things like the interleukin-1 protein or tumor necrosis factor alpha, right? And it keeps those proteins from being processed. It keeps them out of our body. They're just not produced, right? And that leads to a decrease of inflammation. So decreasing pro-inflammatory protons decreases inflammation, and turning on anti-inflammatory pathways decreases inflammation. So again, we're approaching inflammation from multiple different directions here. It's really, really helpful, right? The NRF2 pathway really helps with cytoprotective proteins, again, antioxidation, inflammation, detoxification, and it helps with cellular cleanup, right? So if we have too many misfolded proteins getting produced because our cells are stressed too much, right? Those misfolded proteins need to go through a recycling system, and if we don't have enough ATP to function those systems, they can't recycle, and then we end up with accumulated, conglomerated proteins inside the cells and outside the cells, and a lot of those end up in the brain, right? So like the beta amyloid plaques, alpha-synuclein plaques, all that stuff. The NRF2 pathway also helps maintain integrity of cellular membranes. So just like vitamin E deficiency decreases cellular membrane integrity, it makes them stiffer. So does vitamin D deficiency. So does omega-3 deficiency. So does not having enough resveratrol in your body, right? There's no RDA or anything for resveratrol, but it's really, really important to have in proper concentrations in your body, right? So again, I take about a gram or a gram and a half a day. It's on that first slide. Just like NMN affects NAD+ concentrations in the cell, resveratrol acts on that same pathway, right, during the Krebs cycle or the electron transport cycle. So it works with fatty acid oxidation and then NADH and FADH, right? So remember, NAD+ gets converted into NADH, and in that step, the mitochondria gain electrons to use as energy, right? And that helps our ATPs get produced. So resveratrol, again, helping ATP production. So does a lot of other vitamin and mineral supplements, especially if you're deficient in them. This is from a study. It's referenced below, you guys. So NRF2 increases peripheral nerves. NRF2 expression increases in peripheral nerves of patients that take resveratrol, right? So we can show this objectively with studies. NRF2 has a crucial role in maintaining cellular redox homeostasis. It affects mitochondrial membrane potential and ATP synthesis. We just talked about that. It influences mitochondrial fatty acid oxidation. It supports the structural and functional integrity of the mitochondria themselves. And NRF2 activators have beneficial effects when mitochondrial function is compromised, which it is in at least 80% of the population, because 80% of the population is overweight, obese, or morbidly obese, and that guarantees to foul up your mitochondrial function because your body is working so much harder all the time to deal with this extra weight that you have on you. And things start to happen, like in chronically obese people, you guys, in the adipose tissue, the adipose tissue actually starts developing its own nervous system, right? So it requires a huge amount of energy from our body for it to do things like that it doesn't need to be doing. It just does when we have that material there, right? So if we can limit that stuff, we can really, really amplify the effect of all of this other stuff. Resveratrol has been shown in a lot of studies, again, to combat diabetic neuropathy. And one of the ways that it does so is through NRF2 amplification and a decrease of pro-inflammatory proteins and cytokines.